Join the gang as they unravel the creepiest cases ever in Scooby-Doo's Creepiest Capers.
Hey Scooby fans, in today's video, I'll be looking back at one of the first physical media releases of Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo's Creepiest Capers released to VHS in 1999 and DVD in 2002. This compilation was supposed to have Scooby-Doo's creepiest episodes, and it contains 4 episodes from the classic Scooby-Doo Where Are You? This DVD is a fun time for sure, but we won't have much variety of Scooby-Doo shows this time around. All around, this gives off the most nostalgia to me, using one of the scariest soundtracks for the DVD menu, and whenever I watched this as a kid, it always freaked me out. This is a great DVD compilation, but one thing that I never understood was Frankenstein's monster was on the disc and backing of the DVD, even though a gaggle of galloping ghosts isn't on this DVD. So let's join the spook-busting, case-cracking, snack-munching fun as Scooby-Doo and the gang gear up for their most frightening adventures yet. So let's begin with when the gang sail into an unearthly encounter with the spirit of Redbeard in Go Away Ghost Ship. Airing December 13th, 1969 as the 14th Scooby-Doo Where Are You episode, it mixes up the sea shenanigans that we are used to in a very comedic and creepy mystery. Our episode begins with a cold open when a freight captain of CL Magnus gets jump-scared by the ghost of Redbeard and his ship. We see the gang at the malt shop, their classic magazine reading spot, where they find out about a mysterious Redbeard who has been hijacking the freighters owned by CL Magnus to seek his revenge. And so, it's mystery solving time, so the gang go sneak into C.L. Magnus's place at 11 o'clock at night.
Room service.
Breakfast is served.
At 11 o'clock at night?
I really don't know how these teens are allowed to do any of this. Anyway, instead of calling the police, C.L. Magnus actually lets the gang in for an interview where Magnus tells them the history of Redbeard, but he was apprehended by the ancestors of C.L. Magnus, and the gang are off on a boat headed to go search for Redbeard's ship, in which they have to hop in because of Fred's dumb idea.
Quick, Shag! Full speed reverse! Like double full speed reverse!
And this is when our classic Scooby-Doo formula gets mixed up with the gang separated on a very old and spooky pirate ship, in which Fred and the girls get kidnapped by Redbeard and his pirates, while Scooby and Shaggy hide out and get attacked by a ghost sword, and eventually after a little messing around and role-playing, Redbeard finds them and makes them do his bidding, which is cooking.
It had better be good, or...
Aye, sir!
So Shaggy and Scooby make a ghost stew using inedible items, which for some reason I always liked watching as a kid.
Soap? I hardly use it myself, but why not?
Anyways, after Shaggy gets an idea, they bubble up the room and get out of there. But Redbeard's pirates are nearby, so Shaggy uses his super Shaggy imitation skills and wears a pirate hat to disguise himself as Redbeard, just for them to later fall off of the ship and escape to help the gang in Skull Island. Side note here, this episode seems more like an adventure cartoon than Scooby-Doo. We only get 2 suspects and the mystery element is taken to the side. It's more of an action comedy pirate adventure, which isn't a bad idea for Scooby-Doo, and I personally think it does a great job, but for this compilation, having this episode doesn't really make sense. Back to the episode. The rest of the gang have been trapped by Redbeard, but not really, as Fred comes up with an idea to grab the keys on the table using gum and straw, even though Daphne was closer. I guess Fred assumed this was a man's job. After escaping, the gang meet up with each other and follow jeep tracks in a cave, and they find a clue on Shaggy's awesome pirate cap that shows the price of a cargo that was hijacked. The gang find a chest and a very fake looking cave wall, and this chest has a long necked skull asking for a password, and somehow Shaggy gets a 1 in a billion password guess, which opens the cave door to reveal the secret room. Wow, these pirates are underestimating Shaggy's power. And once the gang get into the cave full of stolen cargo, Redbeard locks them inside, and here comes the gags with the gay blade ghost sword.
Zoinks! It's It's the gay blade of...
And Redbeard and his henchmen chasing the gang around with sword fights, drinking oil, and using plunger bows and an upside down jackhammer to capture the ghost of Redbeard and his henchmen. Once the gang trap him up in a bunch of tires, the very familiar looking Coast Guard arrests them as C.L. Magnus, who is about to lose his business, so he stole from his own ships to sell the cargo, which is confusing, but I guess get your bag, I don't know. And our episode ends with Scooby eating a dry ice fog cloud like a donut, which is something I thought you can actually do.
Scooby-Doo!
And that's Go Away Ghost Ship. This episode is a nice change of pace from the usual Scooby-Doo formula. Because of the somewhat lack of mystery, it's really just a straightforward high seas adventure where some kids are trying to foil pirates, and it has a lot of fun with the pirate theme. Speaking of the pirates, let's get into these so-called ghosts. Besides the lack of anything supernatural with Redbeard and his henchmen, what really sets Redbeard further apart from other Scooby-Doo villains is how articulate he is. Usually Scooby-Doo villains come off as mindless zombies or monsters that only say limited words or just groan. But Redbeard, despite not having one of the cooler looking designs, he ends up being one of the most memorable for just having an actual personality. But I think the writers chose to make him a ghost last second to keep with the supernatural element of Where Are You? Go Away Ghost Ship is a solid episode of Scooby-Doo Where Are You, but it's neither spooky or, in the case of this DVD, creepy, which unfortunately might make it the lowest on the list of these 4 supposed creepiest capers. So can our next one top this one, or will it sink further down on our ranking? Next up, there's more seagoing craziness when a mystery ship leads our heroes to a fog-bound island where a buried pirate treasure causes a hair-raising hassle in the castle. In the Scooby-Doo Where Are You Season 1 episode Hassle in the Castle, the gang get lost in the fog and crash into a haunted island with a mysterious castle on it. The villain of this episode is the classic sheet ghost, who is a very sneaky guy until he's made known. Once the gang are in the castle looking for Daphne, who fell through the trapdoor earlier, the gang quickly find out that that laugh isn't the wind, as it's actually a phantom. But the gang aren't scared of him. In fact, the boys chased the phantom, but he walked through a wall non-stop. When they find Daphne, the gang start looking for clues and find a key that leads to the library, and when reading a certain book leads them to the catacombs. When Scooby is sent to check out the catacombs, he sees a very creepy room full of magic stuff, skeletons, and other scary things, with disappearing cabinets, levitation tables, a ton of magic equipment, and the Phantom, who attacks the gang with our classic Scooby-Doo chase. Later in the episode, the gang are ready to set a very complicated trap.
I gotta hand it to you, Fred. You really know how to build a better mousetrap.
And after a few Scooby snacks, Scooby is off in a very bad disguise to mess with the Phantom, and he sure gets him mad.
You cannot escape me.
And Scooby accidentally trips into the trap, but somehow also falls on top of the Phantom, capturing him. When the police show up, we unmask the Phantom as Bluestone the Great, an ex-magician who's wanted in 6 states. He came to the haunted island to find the hidden Vasquez treasure, so he used all these very clever magic tricks to scare people away. In fact, he shows the gang one last act, how he walked through walls, which was an actual act used by drama and theater back in the day. In the end, Scooby goes out of the castle to search for the treasure, but instead he finds a gopher. And that's more or less Hassle in the Castle. You might be wondering a few things. First, why didn't I explain the episode in further detail? Well, I made a full video about Hassle in the Castle on my channel. If you want to know more details and fun facts about this classic Scooby-Doo episode, check it out. And so, how does this one do for a creep factor? Well, the atmosphere of Hassle in the Castle is probably the spookiest part of the whole thing. And our Phantom can be scary, like when he's stalking the gang, but I personally enjoy the mix of comedy and thrills of Go Away Ghost Ship. So Hassle in the Castle is going to go below Go Away Ghost Ship on our ranking. Next, a road trip to a rock concert strikes a chilling chord for Mystery Inc. as they face a headless specter in the haunted house hangup. As our only season 2 episode, we might just have the creepiest one so far. Our episode begins with an unbelievably cold open and some new strange transitions for Scooby-Doo, with a headless man walking through a spooky mansion. The gang are driving on their way to a rock festival, I'm guessing Woodstock, when they hit a fork in the road.
Hope it doesn't turn out to be an ad for cream.
And a man named Aisha Shanks tells him the short way and the long way, but he explains that the short way passes by the haunted house with the headless specter inside.
And the headless specter. Headless?
So Shaggy and Scooby flip a piece of baloney to choose which way to go, and they end up choosing the short path because they're short on gas. And to no one's surprise, the Mystery Machine gets fried in more ways than one. And of course, they are right next to the Haunted Mansion to ask for gas, and a little scared with a ghost outside.
We might have known. A Scooby ghost. That's all it is.
And man, so far the vibes are so spooky and I love it. The gang break and enter the mansion because they really don't have any other options, and are greeted by a floating candle that chases them into a different room. While the rest of the gang are looking around, Shaggy and Scooby look up at a painting of Jefferson Stillwell, who's pointing at something just for his head to be missing, and then suddenly it reappears, which is a neat trick that scares the gang. Then after hearing a knocking sound coming throughout the mansion, the gang follow the sound that leads them to a room with just a small chest inside, and Scooby volunteers to open it.
No, it's Jefferson Stillwell.
But the gang quickly state that it's a fake. But why is it even there in the first place? Like, did the villain know that they would open that? Just then, Scooby finds a clue. Footprints. The gang follow them, but all of a sudden they split in half. How'd the Spectre do that?
I've seen guys do the splits, but this is ridiculous.
The gang split up with Daphne and Fred going one way and Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby going into a dark doorway with something strange in the dark with them. Once they leave the room, who else but the Headless Spectre was in there with them. They run off for our chase song, Love the World, sung by Austin Roberts. It's a notable song because it's my personal favorite of the show. During our wacky and fun chase, the Spectre and our guys hop on bikes and actually break the window to escape from the top floor of the mansion. And they fall into the well and somehow survive because the water was only knee deep. And so they find a secret tunnel in the well leading to Daphne and Fred, who just found a very important clue that makes no sense.
What's it say?
Doesn't make much sense.
Of course, Daphne falls down the stairs to the fruit cellar with Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby on their way over, and in classic fashion, Fred and Daphne are armed with jars to attack, with Shaggy learning from last episode.
Yikes! Hold it!
Of course, Shaggy thinks he's holding food, but it's actually balloons. Rubber balloons, which explains his ghosts from before. Fred shows Velma the clue and they figure it out since Stillwell shows the way to the greenhouse. But Shaggy and Scooby only find a Scooby snack eating flytrap lily in the Headless Spectre, and they run back to the basement but quickly use the balloons to up, and away. But the Spectre follows them into the sky, and since Daphne and Fred haven't seen him yet, it comes as a huge surprise.
Holy smoke! There really is a headless specter after all!
After Scooby's balloon gets a hole in it, they all fall into a chicken coop for the Headless Spectre to reveal his head as the great-great-great-grandson of Jefferson Stillwell, who was trying to scare them away from his fortune because he thought they were the ones making the noise in his mansion, but it wasn't him or them. So the gang set up a trap for the real villain, a real bad villain. You thought the sheet ghost from last episode was bad? Look at this guy. He didn't even try, and the gang catch him so easily. And guess what? It's the old guy from the beginning, Aisha Shanks, his greedy neighbor who was searching the house for the treasure with an axe. And after all this, Scooby finds the treasure inside the column that fell on top of Aisha. And as a thanks, Penrod points them to the nearest pizza place and the rock festival. And with huge pizzas in hand, we get a Scooby drumming do. And that's the Haunted House Hangup. This is the most classic of a Scooby-Doo episode you can get, but it still adds a twist to the formula to keep us guessing. This episode features one of the few remnants for the original concept of the show, about a teen rock band that travels around solving mysteries. Plus, this episode is notable for having a double mystery, with each villain not knowing of each other, but at least Stillwell tried to be scary. unlike Aisha, who just used balloon ghosts and only wears a white sheet, which easily makes him the laziest Scooby-Doo villain in the original series. Haunted House Hang-Up is a super underrated and underappreciated Scooby episode. It's a great highlight of season 2 and it shows you can still use the series formula but also throw a curveball in to change things up. And so far, it's the creepiest episode of Scooby-Doo's Creepiest Capers. From the atmosphere to the Head of Spectre's laugh and the lack of presence in the episode that adds to the isolation. And even though Aisha is the real villain and a real bad one at that, I'll put that aside because I love this one. But can our last episode shake up the ranking? With possibly saving the best for last, Scooby and the gang try to cash in on $1 million inheritance by sleeping in a ghost-filled mansion and quickly find that a night of fright is no delight. On January 10th, 1970, Hanna-Barbera aired what could be the most chilling Scooby-Doo episode ever. A Night of Fright is no delight. So let's find out if what I said is true. Our episode begins with the gang on a boat heading to a spooky mansion in horrible weather because Scooby was in the inheritance of the late Colonel Beauregard, who he saved from drowning in a fish pond several years before. Upon arriving, one of the Colonel's lawyers, Cosgood Creeps, welcomes them inside to meet the rest of the heirs to the $1 million fortune.
Cousin Simple? Nephew Normal? Sweet cousin Maldehyde? Cousin Slicker? And my old friend Scooby-Doo.
Creeps explains what the Colonel told him to do and that his partner Mr. Crawls couldn't make it tonight.
Creeps and crawls? They sure picked the right lawyers for this job.
So he plays a record on an old phonograph with the Colonel saying to the heirs that they will have to stay the night to get the money. But
The house is haunted.
and since it's 10 o'clock, I guess it's time to turn in, with the boys heading to their room and Creeps leaving the mansion to return in the morning to see who's left.
If any.
In their room, the boys are getting settled, with Scooby going to take a bath and Shaggy fixing a Shaggy super sandwich. Scooby's bath gets interrupted when the bathtub tips up and Scooby falls out into a coal chute, which freaks him out. But that's not all. When he pops out of a pile of coal, a green, shadowy, chain-rattling phantom laughs and scares the heck out of Scooby, and he runs through the wall and runs back up to the room to tell Shaggy. But they don't believe him because the bathtub is nailed into the floor, so it couldn't have happened. Then we get a cut to a clock that strikes midnight with the phantom shadow coming out, and it goes to attack one of the cousins, leaving only his nightcap. Fred finds on a mirror in the room a message that says, "The first is gone, the rest will go, unless you leave the island and row, row, row. Sign the Phantom Shadow."
Phantom Shadow? Then you were right, Scooby.
The rest of the cousins go back to their rooms and lock their doors, but the gang set a trap with a very interesting dummy of Scooby. But the real Scooby and Shaggy are hiding outside on a drain pipe. But the ghost has another thing coming, as he pushes the drain pipe and messes up Shaggy and Scooby's balance, with Velma joining them as they all fall down and around the cave under the mansion. They follow footprints into a room with a collection of Civil War memorabilia that hints that this Colonel Sanders was in the Civil War and he wasn't on the good side, if you get the point. A flying uniform chases them, but it turns out to be a duck after Scooby scares it. Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby go up in a mysterious elevator that leads to Cousin Slicker's room, and all that's left once more is his nightcap. The gang meet up and discover that all of the cousins are missing, all but one, Scooby. They hear an organ playing, and upon finding it, there's another message that says "feed the organ," which the gang think means play the organ. So Scooby plays the organ and something does happen. The walls close in on the gang, but they do end up stopping it, and Velma figures out that feed is actually music, not words. So she plays the notes and a trap door opens leading to the catacombs and a bunch of coffins with the cousins inside, and an empty one that's dog-shaped. If this scene didn't scare you as a kid, I don't know what would. And then the phantom shadows pop out of nowhere, but they aren't shadows, they're green ghosts. And there's two of them. What a spooky reveal. When they appear, Scooby faints, so Shaggy has to carry him to safety as our chase ensues, and these phantoms just can't stop laughing, which I think adds to their craziness. Shaggy and Scooby hide up in a chandelier, but the phantoms are on to them as one of them cuts it, with the boys running to the wine cellar cellar, and they somehow use all of the bottle corks to attack the giggling green ghosts. Then they run to change into some old-fashioned clothes to dance and confuse the phantoms as usual, which unusually actually worked, as they dance them to a trap door which sends the phantoms to the basement. After the gang meetup, Velma sees Shaggy got green paint on his hands from dancing with those green ghosts, which gives Fred an idea to trap them. And once again, this isn't a simple trap.
We use a fan, some soap suds on the floor, a spring-loaded ironing board, and a washing machine.
When Scooby tests the trap out, he messes up, which somehow makes the washing machine fly, with Shaggy and Scooby on top of it chasing the phantoms all over the mansion in a crazy fun scene. And with great timing from the washing machine, they trap the phantoms, which somehow fit in a little washing machine that should have probably chopped them up into little pieces. But also physics, guys. Anyways, the gang unmask our maniac phantoms as creeps and crawls. They really did pick the best lawyers for this job, as their whole plan was to scare off the heirs of the island to get $1 million, which would roughly be over $7 million today, which sounds good to me, but it's actually all in Confederate money. And also all the heirs left, and they never actually died or anything. Those were actually very realistic dummies in those coffins, unlike the Scooby natural phantom who brutally murdered the heirs. But that's a video for another day. And so our episode ends with Scooby eating a floating bone.
Way to go, Scooby-Woo!
And that's, as some people say, the scariest Scooby-Doo episode. A Night of Fright is no delight. And as the penultimate episode of season 1, it has one of the strongest mystery stories of the original series, with a creepy enough place and an interesting backstory with Scooby being in the will of the chicken-loving Colonel Sanders. A Night of Fright is no delay is a all-time classic episode with one of the best mysteries and villains. But can it be the creepiest? Of course it is. The competition isn't that tough for a juggernaut of an episode like this. And for the most part, I like each of these episodes for different reasons, but for the scares alone, this is gonna be our number 1 creepiest episode of Scooby-Doo's Creepiest Cape, which makes our ranking number 1, A Night of Fright is no delay, number 2, Haunted House Hang Up, number 3, Go Away Ghost Ship, and number 4, Hassle in the Castle. But the more important matter is you! How would you rate this compilation of episodes, and what do you think of the iconic and nostalgic VHS and DVD? What other Scooby-Doo DVDs do you want me to cover next? And also, there's a whole playlist on my channel of all the DVDs I've covered so far. And above all, consider subscribing to join this cartoon community. And with all that being said, see ya!